this is actually a comment which I've seen posted a number of times. This person was clearly very intent on me seeing this comment and responding to it. I did actually see it a little while ago, but it took me some time to bring it into an episode just because I was working through a backlog of comments. So I think they ended up posting it 3 more times as a sort of repeat comment, even after I had already seen it. But regardless, we are talking about it now, and it is in fact really just a clarification upon a different comment that we had in the past and discussed in the past. A clarification because I misunderstood what the question was really asking, the question that we discussed previously. And in fairness, this clarification does change the meaning of the question and how I would respond to it. So without any more preamble, let's actually look at this comment. I saw a comment in one of the previous parts of the series, which I think you misunderstood because it was phrased a bit confusingly, so it's understandable. That led me to wonder a few things. Comment questioned how Clancy was able to make Trench since he couldn't have the technology. Comment was referring to the album Trench, not the continent of Trench. See, this was my confusion here because I thought it was asking how Clancy created Trench. And you can understand why I might be confused because we have this line in Bandito where Tyler says, "I created this world to feel some control, destroy it if I want," right? And that line has been a subject of scrutiny and conversation for quite some time, especially leading into the Clancy and Breach era. So you could understand how I might think that a comment asking how Clancy made Trench was generally asking about how Clancy as a figure in the world could have created the world in which he lived, which to me seemed nonsensical and not probable. As it turns out, I misunderstood, and the original commenter was actually asking about how Clancy made the album Trench. And this is based off of an idea, which I have embraced and fully support, that canonically speaking, the band 21 Pilots does exist in the world of Dema, and therefore most if not all of their other albums besides Skilled and Icy also exist in the world of Dema, just presumably sort of suppressed and banned by the bishops of Dema. Not to belabor the point, but the thinking here is that we know the album Skilled and Icy is an album that exists inside the world of Dema. That's part of the lore of that album, is that it's promoted and is a propaganda piece promoted by the bishops and distributed and performed for their citizens. And therefore, the band 21 Pilots is also something that the citizens of Dema now know about. The logic follows that then everything else that comes along with the band 21 Pilots, including the rest of their discography, also exists inside the world. So then the question is, how did they make an album like Trench? And I guess by extension, all the rest of the albums that they made, how Clancy and the Torchbearer could have had the technology to make these albums. So that's the question in my words. I'll just quickly read through the rest of the comment here just in case I missed something else to this question, but that's sort of what the point of the clarification was. I wondered this as well, since it was supposedly made by the Banditos and Clancy during his time at the Bandito camp as a form of rebellion, but is this really the case? I mean, in fairness, I don't know really specifically when Clancy was supposed to have written Trench, but that seems like a fair enough working theory that he wrote it at the Bandito camp. I'm happy to go along with that. But if you want to nitpick whether or not that was the case as to where specifically he wrote it, I'm happy to acknowledge that he could have written it really anywhere else. I don't think it necessarily has to have been written in the Bandito camp. But leaving that aside, if we ignore the technical aspects of this semi-confirmed theory, would it work for the 21 Pilots albums to be canon in the world of Trench? We know that Skilled and Icy definitely exists, but what about the rest of the albums? And if they do exist in the world, exactly how would they have come to be? And how come the bishops didn't do anything about it? Do we also assume that Clancy's of previous cycles made all of them? In the Skilled and Icy livestream, the hosts do call the boys 21 Pilots and even refer to them by name, Tyler and Josh. Is the band itself supposed to exist within the lore? How much does the lore and the band's history overlap? Also, as far as we know, music isn't something that's commonly practiced in Dema, so how exactly can one even learn music whilst within the city walls? These are too many things, but I would love your thoughts on them. Yeah, I skimmed through some of that. Let's go back and take some of these line by line, and hopefully that will sort of give you the answers that you were looking for. But again, overall, as an overarching thing, I would say that yes, Clancy did create Trench and the rest of the albums within the lore. I do believe that canonically speaking, the albums, the whole 21 Pilots discography exists within the lore, and that the citizens of Dema aren't necessarily aware of them, really. Again, from an official perspective, I think we can surmise that the citizens don't necessarily know about these albums. They haven't really heard them. They've probably just been suppressed by the bishops of Dema. That would be my thinking, right? If Skilled and Icy is the propaganda album, that's the only one that's really allowed. As to technically how he would have carried that out. That is an interesting question. I mean, it really lends itself to a lot of speculation about things that are just not touched upon by the band in any official way at all. We do get glimpses of sort of the technological era in which Dema exists through the Skilled and Icy era, and the aesthetic of that, it seems to be a lot more technology that we would consider vintage today. It does seem like they have technology. They do have electricity. They do have sort of modern technology, not, 2026 technology, but modern technology. They have TVs. They have at least tapes, cassettes, probably vinyls as well, and ways to record them. And certainly they have ways to do a whole broadcast live show on TV. They're not lacking in the technology to record and distribute music. So then the question is, how widespread is this technology? Is it a technology that the bishops hoard in their towers, or is it something that the citizens also have access to, or certain citizens might have access to? There's also this idea of Good Day Dema being a radio show, and presumably there are other radio shows that also get airplay inside Dema. These would all be bishop sanctioned. Are they all directly run by the bishops, or can some of them be bishop sanctioned and actually run by other citizens, which could then leave room for radio shows or radio hosts that do operate under the watchful eye of Dema, but aren't necessarily being run by seized vessels that the bishops are directly controlling? Could those citizens running those radio shows let someone like Clancy into the recording studio to record these sort of secret albums and help distribute them? Or is it something that just the banditos have built their own technology out in the wilderness to do this? I don't know. But ignoring the technical aspects, as Galaxy requests us to, so leaving all of that aside, would it work for them to be canon? Yes, I think it would. It depends what you mean by work. Would it contradict anything we know about the lore for that to be the case? I don't think so. I don't see any reason why they can't be, from a canonical perspective, something that does exist in the world of Trench and Dema. It's just, again, I don't think the citizens really have widespread access to them. I think they're suppressed by the bishops, but they do exist. Clancy did write them. How exactly would they have come to be if they do exist? We sort of touched on this a little bit. The bishops didn't do anything about it. I think they did. I think they probably suppressed it and didn't allow them to be distributed. Could be part of the reason why they had an eye on Clancy, because he was writing all this sort of rebellious music, and that was part of, why they wanted to arrest him. Again, another thing is we see in the video for Nico and the Niners, we see that, Tyler and Josh, Clancy and the Torchbearer are playing music. They have a microphone set up, they have a drum set, and you could say, sort of like in the music video for Heathens, okay, they probably didn't have an actual drum set and bass set up in a prison, right? Like the way they have in the Heathens music video. And so this could just be a sort of music video suspension of belief, or whatever the term is, allowing for them to be playing music while in the middle of this fantasy dystopian world. They didn't actually have a drum set and microphone. This is just something you sort of have to play along with because they want to actually play the song in the music video as part of the music video and the aesthetic of the music video. But from a canonical perspective, they didn't actually do that in the same way, right? That could be an argument. The way I just fleshed it out is a little convoluted, but I think you can understand what I'm saying. It's almost like a fourth wall thing that doesn't supposed to be really happening. But the problem with that argument or that line of thinking is, while it might apply to some of their music videos, I don't think it applies. It's directly shown to not apply to Nico and the Niners, because we see the bishops down underground where they're practicing the annual assembly of the Glorious Con. They're having their little violism practices underground. We do see that there are shockwaves being sent through so that the water in the barrels they have down there is starting to ripple from the Torchbearer playing his drum set. And that's how the bishops notice, okay, something's happening, and so they leave, and then they go up to the overground and start trying to find them, but they're too late, obviously, and so they just find the kids picking up the coat and things like that Clancy was wearing. So that at least confirms that musical instruments are accessible enough that people can play them, and microphones and things like that people can play them and have access to them. The banditos have access to them. Now, were they really lugging a drum set around? I don't know. I don't really know the specifics of how that worked. But again, it's hard to deny the fact that Nico was alerted to the fact that Clancy was being broken out because the Torchbearer was drumming and it was sending shockwaves through the city. Do we also assume that Clancy's of previous cycles made all of them? I don't know. That could be one way of looking at it. It could be that this particular Clancy, the one that we see the visual narrative following, made all of them. It could be that in previous cycles, Clancy was more focused on writing in the journal, and then for this most recent cycle, the one that we see from the visual perspective in the music videos, he was more focused on writing the music, and so it was just his way of journaling, essentially, but he wasn't directly adding to the journal himself. And then, as far as we know, music isn't something that's commonly practiced in Dema. I don't know if that's actually true. The letters that were released during the Clancy tour between banditos and citizens of Dema, and then I think also just between banditos generally, did mention that there were people playing music. It's sort of a throwaway reference, but again, it's one of those things that, while not central to the message of that letter, does confirm that just random banditos have guitars or whatever instrument it was, and are just know how to play music. So again, I think musical instruments are accessible to at least the banditos, if not the citizens more widely. I don't know that music is wholly suppressed in the same way, or at the very least, if it is something that's maybe technically not allowed, the bishops don't do a lot to enforce that rule and crack down on it. Again, this was a long comment and a long answer accompanying it. Hopefully this helped to shed some light on some possible ways to think about Clancy creating Trench, the album, not the world, inside Dema, and how that technology could have been possible. Like you kind of alluded to, we don't know for sure. It takes a lot of speculation to come up with ideas for how he could have accessed that technology, but I don't think it contradicts the lore or anything that we have been shown so far to say that he did have access, or he could have had access to that, or that musical instruments or something he could have available to him. So hopefully that makes sense, and hopefully that answers your question.